So on page 367, you'll find they're using words, right? Using words. And like I said, it's going to be a lot of repetition, but repetition deepens the impression. It says the following. Income Y is at its equilibrium level when it's equal to the level of aggregate spending A. When aggregate spending A is greater than the total production, or income Y, firms experience an unplanned decrease in their inventories. The reason is that current production is insufficient to meet the demand for goods and services. Firms, therefore, have to draw on their stocks or inventories to meet the demand. The unplanned decrease in the inventories acts as an incentive to firms to increase their production of goods and services. When aggregate spending A is less than the total production Y, then firms experience an unplanned decrease in their inventories. Firms will find that they cannot sell all the goods and services produced and therefore lower their production. Equilibrium occurs only when aggregate spending A is equal to total production or income Y. Now, however, let us use equations or symbols. And if you've got a paper next to you, now is obviously a very, very, very good time to put this together as well. The first thing that we find is A is equals to C plus I. Right? But remember, when it comes to C, it's autonomous C plus the marginal propensity to consume times income plus autonomous investment. Now tell me, A in this case, we're going to find out, but what is the autonomous consumption spending? What is that digit inside inside this equation on page 367? What's the number that they've given for autonomous consumption? Please put it into the chat. Autonomous consumption. Is anyone there? Dylan, Cabello, Kian, Kristen, Leon, or Leon, I mean to say. Refense. Okay. I shall continue nonetheless. 100%. It's 50. All right. And in this case, your marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. Y plus 150. Now this together is 200 plus 0.8y. All right, fairly easy to understand. What's important here is that someone needs to sit down and say, okay, I hear this, but how do we obviously get to equilibrium, knowing what we know here? Now remember, this is the second bit. A is equals to y. So therefore y is equals to 200 plus 0.8 y. Right, if we take this y to the left hand side, then this would be y minus 0.8 y, which is equals to 200. And to simplify this even further, we'll then say y one minus 0.8 is equals to 200. All right, still continuing with this, guys. We'll then divide 0. This would then be, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. This would then be y 0.2 equals 200. And now just to get y, we'll divide both sides by 0.2, and that would be 200 divided by 0.2. Now, please put that in your calculator, and as a result, let me know what digit you got. Absolutely. And all this lets us know is that the equilibrium level is 0. So the equilibrium level of income is 1,000. Now, if we look on that same page, on page 365, if we look at our graph 17.8, right, we had the function c at c is equals to 50 plus 0.8y, right? 50 was the consumption, autonomous consumption, right? 150, however, was the investment, autonomous investment spending. Now, if we add those two together, we get autonomous spending, which is 200, the 150 plus the 50. So there's a shift from C is equals to 50 plus 0.8y all the way to A is equals to C plus I, which equals 200 plus 0.8y. Just let me know in the chat whether that makes sense. Give me a thumbs up. We're talking about the graph in this case. We already drew a graph earlier on. All we're doing now, guys, is just putting numbers into it. Let me know if that makes sense. Give me a thumbs up in the chat if that's the case. Awesome, Kian. To answer your question, Defense, remember that the equation that I have here is y is equal to, sorry, y 1 minus 0.8 is equals to 200. So that 1 minus 0.8 equates to 0.2. Let me know if that makes more sense. Awesome. Kian, Kristen, thanks. And thanks for also the responses, Camille and Defense. Right? So that's all that's really changed here, guys. That's all that's really changed. Now, if you go to graph 17.9, figure 17.9 on page 368, all they've done is they've basically drawn the 45-degree line. Maybe, I know Kian would probably say, please just draw it. And I believe that would be the wise thing to do. We start off with our normal graph. We have our 0 over here. We have our aggregate spending on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis we have our income. Now, next up, we have our 45-degree line, where A is equals to Y. Now, we already know from the previous example that the aggregate spending is 200. And then we have our line. And our line here is A is equals to 200 plus 0.8 Y. And this is equilibrium, our equilibrium point. Now, what's of uttermost importance here is that you then want to draw, on that equilibrium point, you want to draw a line towards the y-axis, and then you'd want to draw another line from aggregate spending. And this is where you'd find that 1,000 that we had drawn, or rather come to earlier on using our equations. We've only forgotten one thing here, and that's just to indicate that this is a 45-degree line. And that's it. That's it for the equilibrium level of income when it comes to showing it as a graph. But I know for a fact that we're also going to work with quite a few numbers as well. Okay, but right now, and I know that I keep asking this, but I do genuinely want to know that you're good. So just let me know whether you're good with the graph that we've drawn and how we got to the numbers and why we put the numbers where we put the numbers. Please just give me a thumbs up in that regard. I'll just take 2, seeing that we're only 8 right now. If however you don't understand, please, by the same token, just let me know. Put on your mic and let's have a discussion. Awesome, Kian. Let's just wait for 2 more hands. Great stuff. Okay, awesome. I'll shift right along. So the next thing, guys, is that now we start to use numbers, okay, to basically put this across. And this is a very important bit. And this is on page 369. 369. And we've got 2 different scenarios there. Now, scenario 1, we've been given y, which is 700. And in scenario 3, we've been given y, which is equals to 1,200. Now, using our equation, right, where a is equal to 200 plus 0.8 y, right? The next thing we do from here, guys, is that we go, okay, great. So that's 200 plus 0.8, y in this case being 700. And then from there, we obviously equate what 0.8 is multiplied by 700. And when you populate that into your calculators, what number do you get? What number do you get when we multiply 0.8 times 700? Absolutely. So now we have 560, and if we add the 2, it's then 760. Now, here's a good question that I have for you. Right? Remember, guys, A is meant to equal Y. Tell me, does 760 equal 700 in this case? Yes or no? Absolutely. So in this case, we find that they do not equal each other, and therefore A is greater than Y. Now, A is greater than Y by 60, so there's a excess demand, forgive the handwriting, of 60 units. On the other hand, if we plug in this for exactly the same thing on your next scenario, we'll have A is equals to 200 plus 0.8y this time it's 1,200, so it's 0.8 times 1,200. Now this we already know will obviously equate to 960. And as a result, it's 1,060. 1,160. Now remember, aggregate spending is meant to equal income or production. And the question that we obviously have is 1,160 equal to 1,000. And we'll realize that, wait a second, no, that is definitely not it. So as a result, what we end up seeing is that your aggregate spending is less than your income or production. And therefore, we'll write excess supply of sorry, this is 1,200, apologies, of 40 units. Any questions as of yet, guys? Let me know in the chat. I know this is still fairly new information, but let me know in the chat. On which one, Cabello? The second one or the first one? It will be, in this case, it will be excess supply. And the reason for that is because you've produced a whole lot more than people have obviously spent. Ah, awesome. Good stuff. Okay. I'm moving right along. On page 370, we have the algebraic version of the simple Keynesian model and how they obviously derive it. Now, this is a very important thing because you actually use this throughout. And it basically just changes here and there depending on which unit you're dealing with, but it's exactly the same stuff. Exactly the same stuff. So we start our equation as follows. Y is equals to A. But we realize that A is equals to C plus I. And specifically, C plus I. Now, what essentially happens here is that we see that we need to make sure that we get to Y being isolated. We want to isolate Y. So as a result, the next step is to then take your CY, subtract it from your right side and from your left side. So therefore, the equation will then read Y minus CY is equals to autonomous consumption plus autonomous investment. When we do some factorization around this, we then have your Y is 1 minus C, which is still equal to your C bar I bar. But in order to isolate Y once again, we then have to multiply it by 1 over 1 minus C. And this would have to do on both sides. As a result, these two cancel. And therefore, you end with the equation Y is equals to 1 over 1 minus C multiplied by C plus I. And ultimately, this is what we call the multiplier, which you multiply by aggregate spending. And that's what Y is going to equal to. And this is how you get to your equilibrium point outside of that. Now, out of these two equations, guys, the most important one out of the two equations that I'm sharing here, the most important one, I believe, is this one. When it comes down to putting numbers and so forth and finding out what you need to do, I'll definitely put that as major importance. Okay. Now, I can see by the amount of people that we started with versus the amount of people that we currently have, that we might have a bit of fatigue that we're dealing with. Do let me know if that is the case.